Hello, my saucy little flamingos. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. This is a topic that I feel very deeply about. It's very important to me. I've been meaning to circle back around to it since I first discussed it in 2018, and people have asked me to circle back around to it. So I'm going to give some more insights today on this topic. And I want to start right off the bat by saying that these perspectives that I'm giving you are from the point of view of a spiritual counsellor and witch who's spoken to a lot of people who have come out from underneath the Christian umbrella, and usually the more conservative, fundamentalist side of the Christian umbrella. And they are now exploring alternative spirituality, witchcraft, etc., and they're finding it difficult. I've had the really great privilege of talking to a lot of people that find themselves in this kind of situation, and we've brainstormed it, we've talked about what the issues are. I was not raised in a sort of a conservative or a very full-on Christian household. I was not raised with any established religion. I was also not raised with really any spiritual dogma of any kind. So I'm very privileged in that way. A lot of my perspectives and insights come from talking to people, though, who have been through those kinds of things and would describe themselves as having something called religious trauma syndrome, or indeed they would describe themselves as being the victims of religious abuse. You know, so brainwashing from a really young age, being fed full of very scary things that prevented them from owning their own identity, sexuality, etc., that kind of stuff. Being made to feel very fearful of hell or the devil from a very young age, not feeling like they could leave the family religion because of the isolation that might occur or the rejection. I've had lots of these kinds of conversations. And even for those people who dearly love their family and their parents and would never say that they were religiously abused per se, they do acknowledge some very deep wounds that have occurred as the result of being raised in a very strict, very sort of overbearing, very extreme Christian situation. So I guess I've gathered some thoughts as I've gone along and had these conversations. As I mentioned, darlings, I have already made a video on this in 2018, and I will leave the link for that video down below. In that video, I covered isolation and abandonment that can happen when you step away from the Christian religion, dealing with the fear of hell, dealing with the fear of the devil, dealing with the sense of loss that comes from losing the philosophy and the standards that you were given and raised with, that you maybe thought were true for a long time. I also talk about trying to enjoy the journey of exploring your new spiritual pathway, your more authentic spiritual pathway. And I talked about the importance of not pressurizing yourself to stop your old beliefs straight away. They will come up. Even the things you intellectually really don't believe anymore will still come up emotionally a lot of the time. And I talked about religious trauma syndrome, the importance of connecting with the like-minded, and the value of giving your inner child a different experience when it comes to the religious upbringing and some of the memories that you have around that. So if you feel like that sounds useful and you did not see that video, again, I'll leave it down below for you. I'm going to be talking about some other bits and pieces today that I think will draw a more complete picture of where I'm coming from as someone who's had these conversations with people a lot and tried to help formulate strategies and think about how we can get that individual that's talking with me comfortable with forging their own spirituality and trying out certain spiritual things if they want to. So that's what this video is about. I want to flesh out some other ideas, give you as much insight and hopefully as much support as possible if you are going through this. So when you leave the Christian church and you realise that you don't believe a lot of those things that you were taught, you feel called towards spirituality, whether that's in the witchcraft paradigm or if it's something else, but you feel called towards certain things that are certainly outside of your Christian instruction that you were given growing up, you might be tempted to throw yourself very much wholesale into the new thing. You might be tempted to immediately define it, very quickly know exactly what it is that you believe, and very quickly be able to label it and start practicing it fully, because you are so used to having this kind of very full-on, very structured, very predetermined practice and a very strong label that explains for yourself and everybody else who you are religiously, how you identify spiritually. So one thing I would say is do not worry about trying to affix a label to yourself quickly. Don't worry about having it all worked out straight away. Try to enjoy the journey, and that kind of links to what I said in the last video in 2018. Try to actually enjoy that sumptuous feeling of exploring, being curious about what you believe, just learning, leaning into things, trying things, and don't be so concerned with, okay, now I need to know exactly what I'm doing, exactly who I am, exactly what label goes with these beliefs, because actually you end up pigeonholing yourself way too quickly. It feels confusing. A lot of the time you have to backtrack. And this is actually true of people who explore spirituality without having come from an extreme Christian upbringing. A lot of the time we just want to decide what we are and what we do and what we believe very quickly. You know, we want to go into the fast lane, and actually that can often cause confusion because there's so much out there that you might want to learn and get into. You do not want to end up labeling yourself too quickly, and there's no pressure to do that either. What I would say, and what I've advised to some of my clients that I speak with that they've said was useful for them, is you can now begin to just start writing down what your beliefs are, or even just what your beliefs are not anymore. So things you used to believe, or things you were taught over and over again anyway. Whether or not you truly took them to belief in your heart is a different thing. But you can start thinking about, okay, these are the things I no longer believe, or I certainly feel very wobbly and uncertain if I believe them or not. And these are the things that I think I believe now. It doesn't have to be that everything you write on this list is really adamantly what you believe, like really strongly. Some of the things you write on the list are just going to be things you're thinking about, things you are contemplating, things that you're wondering whether or not they might form a part of your later belief structure. And what this does is it gives you permission to lean into the journey instead of trying to reach the finish line, or instead of trying to deny that you're going on this spiritual adventure and you're looking at things and you're wondering about things. Start writing down your beliefs. And I would recommend, if possible, typing them out, because you're going to want to add to them. You're going to want to change things. You're going to probably want to change the wording of things. But if you begin to write that spiritual manifesto, or that list of things that you feel you do believe and you are interested in, or you think you might be leaning towards, I think it just legitimizes the pathway that you are walking and the thing that is happening now. And you can start looking back over it with curiosity. And like I said, adding to things, changing things. So I've written down here, what is your theological framework now? Are you interested in pantheism? Are you interested in polytheism? What do you think is actually going on when it comes to the divine? What is divinity to you? What does it mean? Are you a witch? Are you not a witch? These kinds of things, you know. Do you want a place in your home where you can go to contemplate or go to worship, kind of thing? So start thinking about these things and just writing them down to give yourself permission to have that experience of playing with ideas and thinking about what you believe. At this time, I think it also might be healthy for you potentially to think about what, if anything, you are taking with you from the Christian paradigm. There are so many people, especially under the witchcraft umbrella, who took precisely nothing with them from their Christian upbringing or from their previous Christian belief structure, nor would they want to. They don't like the idea of it. It is not going to work for them, and that's absolutely fine. But people are different. There are certainly witches and spiritual people, spiritual practitioners of every stripe, who see Jesus Christ as a really great role model or an ascended master. You'll find a lot of people who do work with angels. You'll find a lot of people who, like myself, work with the Blessed Holy Mother Mary. So you've got basically things that you might want to take with you. You might have a close relationship with Archangel Michael. You might have a close relationship with saints if you were raised Catholic, you know. So there might be certain things that you are taking with you from the old paradigm. They might be things that you just want in the interim period that you still feel a closeness to or an affection for, and they may not mean as much later. They may fade into the background later, and that's fine. But I think it's really good to give yourself permission to walk away with some things from the former belief structure. Just because you are going towards something new doesn't mean you necessarily want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is okay for you to have some things on that list that are about Jesus, or they are about bits in the Bible that you appreciate, or whatever it might be, family traditions that you had that were religious, just different things like that. If there are certain things that you feel still very connected to, that give you a sense of connection with the divine or feel spiritually important to you, put those things on the list as well, so that you feel that, yes, okay, this is part of the exploration. It's not about just closing the door on everything. It might be for you, and if it is, that's fine. But please be reassured that for a lot of people it isn't, and it's okay to feel that Jesus loves you. even though you are not going to church anymore. It's okay to feel that you still have a very close connection to Mary, even though you would not describe yourself as Catholic any longer. These things are okay. This is definitely an area of things that gets difficult for people that used to be Christian or were raised Christian. The idea that they would leave that framework but still feel very closely connected to certain things from it can be very tricky, and it can feel weird, it can feel wrong. Of course, I want to encourage you as much as possible to try and see past that. Instead of wondering what other Christians would think about you still feeling close to Jesus, for example, wonder instead whether or not that would be beneficial for you. Would it make you into a good class of person? Would it help you to be the best version of yourself? Would it make you feel good? Would it help your mental health and well-being? Does it make you generally more positive, stronger, more empowered if you maintain that connection with JC? If so, isn't that the more important consideration than whether or not certain Christians would turn their nose up at it, or tell you that it's not possible, or tell you that Jesus doesn't love you? Is it really about them? Is it really about what they would think and how they may condemn you? Or is it about whether or not you are connecting with Jesus because there's something about it that really helps you to be the best version of yourself? It helps you to heal. It helps you to feel like you can do the right thing when it's necessary to do so. It empowers you. It inspires you to keep JC in your practice. One thing that I'm really interested in with things like working with Jesus Christ outside of the Christian dogma and the Christian context, but just working with the story of him, working with what he represented, is I like the idea of the Christ flame. I like the idea of there being a Christ energy that can be manifest within all of us. And if that's where your exploration is taking you, that maybe you don't want the doctrine, the dogma, the rules, the church going, or any of that, but maybe you actually just want to connect with the Christ flame inside of you, your ability to be Christ-like in your way of approaching things, then of course he's a teacher, he's a master, he's an ascended master. So I would urge you as much as possible to try to get past that feeling that you are not allowed to take something with you when you leave the Christian garden and go into the, the alternative spiritual forest, I think take with you whatever is going to elevate you as a human being, whatever is going to sing to your soul, whatever is going to make you feel more in touch and aligned with those things that are good about you and good about humankind. I mean, there just can't be, in my view, anything much wrong with that. So I would say when you're writing the list and you're thinking, oh my God, can I take that? Because that's like from the old place and I don't know if I'm allowed that anymore. Don't worry about what other people, what Christians would think, what people from your old church would think, what your family would think. Think about how it's going to enhance you, benefit you, strengthen you, make you into the kind of person that you want to be in the world. And if it would help in those ways, then isn't that truly where the spiritual rubber meets the road, the earthly road? Isn't that what we do these things for? So I would give yourself permission, if possible, to get past that and don't worry about what others would think. Worry about how it's going to affect you, how it will be good for you. Also, I think part of emancipating yourself from an organised religion and from all of the doctrine associated with that is a sacred defiance and a sense that nobody gets to tell you what your relationship with God is about or what your relationship with Jesus is about, or the saints or Mary or anything else. Nobody gets to tell you where your moral compass should be directed according to a book. You feel into your moral compass and you live your life accordingly. So there's definitely a sacred defiance there. So I also think, for me, for example, I have a working relationship with Mother Mary. People have sometimes asked me if I feel like that is blasphemous or if it's appropriative, if I feel badly about it. In my view, it's an extremely sacred thing to have that ongoing dynamic relationship with Mother Mary, because to me, it's like saying nobody gets to dictate to me what my relationship with this incredible divine feminine energy is all about. I don't need a middleman. It's just us, the closeness that I feel, the connection, the significance. I don't want anybody else in charge of that or telling me what to believe about that. And I also defy the many, many, many times that the image of Mother Mary has been used in propaganda, actually, to oppress women, to try to prevent people from winning reproductive rights all over the world. This idea that she would somehow be disapproving of that when I think of how her image has been used to manipulate and to terrify and to sway political progress against people who might need access to clean, safe abortion, that kind of thing makes me proud and potently righteous about having a relationship with Mary, because no one gets to tell me that that's what she's about. That's not what she's about, not in my view. Never was, never will be. So, you know, for me, there's also that sacred defiance. I don't know, your mileage might vary on how you feel about that. But for me, I think it's very potent that we take things from a context in which we were a part of that, we experienced that in some way, but now we feel like there's so much more to it, that these things, these figures, these energies, these stories that we love could never exist merely within the confines of that religious agenda, that sort of doctrine. They have to be free to come with us, to serve us on our journey, however we identify spiritually. So I would keep that in mind as well if you can. One thing I end up talking about a lot with people who are ex-Christians or they've come away from that paradigm and they're trying to explore other things is the fear that they feel about actually putting their interests into practice. You know, I've spoken with people who fear meditation, who fear spellcraft, who fear even reading about and researching certain things to do with the occult. They might fear playing with tarot cards, that kind of stuff, you know. One thing that I've suggested to a few clients and I've had good results, they've told me that this was a useful thing, was I've suggested maybe trying to categorize the things that you're interested in, that you want to try, that give you the least fear, that you feel kind of the most comfortable with, and then the things, you know, on the other side of the spectrum that you really are very freaked out by. Because what you want to do is you want to ease yourself in gently. There's no point, I don't think, in pressurizing yourself to do a spell if that really freaks you the hell out. You know, if that's something that you really have been conditioned your whole life not to do, not to mess with, not to get involved with. And so even though you know that you have an instinct perhaps towards spellcraft, you are going to be afraid of it. Maybe for you, starting by just walking out in nature, connecting with the elements, giving thanks to just the beautiful world that we live in, the natural world, all of these different gorgeous energies and the changing of the seasons, the cycles of nature, the bird song, all of that jazz, you know, the plants, the trees. Maybe for you, that is going to be a lot more of a safe starting point, something that will lift you up, it will elevate you, it will help you feel connected to your new spiritual paradigm, but it will not scare the holy bejesus out of you at the very first step, you know? So it's building up to things. I think if people are afraid of meditation, they could try guided or group meditation first. Or if they're really even afraid of that, they could just try doing some deep breathing and just focusing on the breath for like 30 seconds or something like that, you know? Maybe it's about reading some books on meditation first. Maybe it's about looking at the different techniques for meditation and just getting yourself more comfortable and familiar with the idea of it before you actually do it. So I think it's possible that we can be very gentle with ourselves, you know, for those of us who are coming out of a very strict Christian paradigm where things like witchcraft were very demonized, and maybe you feel afraid of doing certain things. Don't push yourself to do things that really are extremely scary to you. You'll build up to that, you'll work up to that, but maybe it's about starting at a place where you feel a bit more comfortable or where things feel the least scary for you. For some people, there are certain sets of oracle cards that are going to be a lot less scary than tarot cards to start with. So tarot might have a really big association for you emotionally with something that is forbidden, something that is not great to mess with, that you really shouldn't be touching. And the word tarot might be quite loaded. If you look at oracle decks, you can see that there isn't the same system. Yes, of course, oracle decks may also be stigmatized, but it's often not the same, not to the same degree as tarot, which is very much seen as this kind of, you know, touchstone, this portal into the occult and into, you know, demons and whatnot. You know, that's how tarot is talked about. Maybe you just want to get a nice mindfulness oracle deck, something very light, something that, you know, wouldn't immediately start to freak you out. So it's got no symbols in it. It's got no mentions of astrology in it. Something like Chris Carr's Sexy Love Notes oracle deck, where it's just lovely, high vibe, well-intentioned messages about living well, about, you know, being authentic and about having a good day. You know, maybe you want to begin there. Don't freak yourself out by buying something that you look at and you think, I've got so much baggage around that. That's so emotionally loaded for me. There's no need to jump in at the deep end. I think there's ways of doing things where you gently go into it. If you want to have an altar and that's something that freaks you out, start by just having a contemplation space, a nice thinking area. You know, put some flowers on there, maybe a crystal if you want, or a nice image of something, and just, you know, sit there and have that as your contemplation space. If in the future you definitely know that you want this big altar with all these statuettes and all these witchy bits, and you want that so much, and in your heart you imagine yourself having that, but you're not there yet, then you're not there yet, and that's okay. You do not have to push yourself to do that immediately. You can work up to it, you can go slowly. You can just say, you know what, I have a table with some flowers and a candle, and that's it. I don't have any other imagery, and I just sit here, and this is my space to allow myself to contemplate. And you don't have to go off the deep end and go full occult if you are not ready yet. So I think that's really worthwhile to mention too. Think about the activities that freak you out the least, that you feel like you've already been doing and they've been good, or you would like to try them and they don't feel too emotionally high risk. And start there. Do not pressure yourself to become the Grand High Witch overnight. I know this is something that I say quite often, darlings, but I think it's always worth repeating, you know. Give yourself credit. Make sure that you actually celebrate your wins. If you are someone that's finding it difficult to lean into your authentic spiritual path, you've got baggage, you've got trauma from previous religious instruction, you're not sure maybe how far you want to go or what that's going to look like. Every time you do something that allows you that spiritual freedom, give yourself credit. Recognize that it was hard for you to give yourself that. And take a moment and just marvel at your own bravery. Marvel at your own sovereignty. Marvel at the majesty of carving out your own thing. And know that you have had to do work on yourself to get to the point where that was possible. And okay, maybe people that weren't raised with a really extreme religious framework are not going to understand why it was so difficult for you to let yourself meditate, or let yourself get a book of shadows, or even watch witchy YouTube videos. But you know what? That's just not their experience. So they wouldn't understand it. I mean, I don't understand it from first-hand experience. The only reason I think I have such an interesting portal into how people might feel going through this is because I've spoken to so many people who've been through this, and so many people that watch my videos have been through this, and they are going on a journey of healing and reclaiming their right to have access to their own spiritual experiences. And it's a wonderful thing to behold. And I commend the work that you are doing. So please make sure that you commend the work you're doing as well. That is a really important part of this. Give yourself credit. Acknowledge when you did something scary, when you did something that felt high risk. Acknowledge that you did that and be proud of yourself. This is such an important part of this conversation, darlings, talking about spending time around Christians and spending time in church after you yourself either do not attend church anymore or you don't believe those things anymore. Now, there might be certain occasions throughout the year where you do have to go to church with your family or with your partner's family, whatever the case may be. You might still live at home, and therefore you're probably sometimes going through quite heavy compromises to have to engage with a religion that is not really your belief structure and your preference. I think that it's really important to recognise you are entitled to have prep time before you go into those kinds of situations. Acknowledge that it can be uncomfortable. Acknowledge that it feels scary. Acknowledge that it is not necessarily something that is easy for you, and there is an emotional toll afterwards. And therefore, I think it's important that you know you can prepare to spend time in church or to spend time in a really religious environment where a lot of people are talking about religious stuff. You know, center yourself before you go into those situations. Gently remind yourself that you are entitled to your spiritual sovereignty, and that being in this kind of environment is something that you're going to take a deep breath, you're going to ground and center, you're going to go in there, you're not going to absorb or ingest anything that you feel is harmful for you. You may have to go through the motions, but then afterwards you're going to do something really self-loving for yourself, you know, to really sort of redress that balance and get yourself back feeling how you want to feel spiritually. I think it's important to know what might trigger you in these kinds of environments. So I've certainly worked with clients for whom going back into the church environment, there are things that are said that are triggering. There are things that are done that can be triggering. And by triggering, I literally mean like upsetting, really difficult. They feel oppressive. It doesn't feel right. And it really sort of has a very difficult impact on the emotions, and lots of difficult memories sometimes associated with it. And if you know that you experience that kind of stuff, please take some power jewelry or take a crystal in your pocket, hold it, fiddle with it, remind yourself that you will be out of the situation as soon as you can be, and that you are strong within yourself and your sense of the fact that you do not have to believe things that don't resonate with you. And you do not have to feel that you've got to toe that line. You know, they're just words. Let them wash over you, and try to stay with yourself. You know, use words of power, use mantras and affirmations in your mind. If you're going through a church service and you feel like the pastor, the leader of the service, is saying things that are hateful, you know, that really just do not vibe with who you are and what you believe spiritually. And believe me, I've seen a lot of footage of pastors saying hateful things, very misogynistic things, uncomfortable things. Like I listen to what some religious leaders say, and I'm like, come again? Like, what is it? How? What? So I know that there's definitely going to be some times where things are really difficult to process. Know what those triggers are. Take those deep breaths when those things are happening. And remember, at the end of the day, whether it is for you or whether it is for your children or grandchildren, if you think harm is being done to anyone by being there, you are entitled to take action. You are entitled to walk out. If you're a parent, you're entitled to say you don't want your child to go to a particular church service or a particular religious event. You are entitled to do that. Now, everyone's going to be different. You're going to have to weigh it up a bit differently. Sometimes you're going to feel like it's okay to attend or for your children to attend. But if there comes a situation where there is something you do not feel is okay, you are entitled to take action. Do not think that you're not, because you are. No one is going to die if you walk out of a church service. No one is going to die if you say, I don't want to attend that, but I'll meet you afterwards at the family home. You are allowed to say that, and it's really down to you to have that dialogue with yourself. Is that something that needs to happen? Is this something you need to protect yourself from? Lots of people who have come out from under the Christian umbrella and they're sort of devising their own thing, exploring their own spirituality, they might feel that there is a void there and a kind of directionless feeling, because they no longer have somebody telling them what to do, what to believe, what is right. And there may be a temptation there to go in search of that and replace the institution of the church with an institution of a very charismatic religious leader, you know, or a group that you have to be initiated into, something like that. If you find that your spirituality is enhanced by structure, routine, sets of instructions that you can follow, tradition, there's nothing wrong with that. There are lots of people who find those things deeply valuable and very helpful. What I would say, though, is just check your reasoning. If you're looking for someone that can be the new overlord of your spiritual experience and tell you what to do and what to think and all of that, just gently ask yourself, are you trying to replace that feeling that you had, that paternal overlord? And believe me, when I say paternal, it's not always male. There are plenty of women that you can find throughout the spiritual and self-help and new age and witchy movements who are, you know, certainly, I'm sure, messing with the whole overlord, I'll tell you what to think, you know, vibes. It's not just men, it's people of all genders, okay? But yeah, if you're looking for that sort of, parental, I feed you the information, you take it on, you're the pupil and I'm the, you know, the all-knowing, all-seeing eye. If you notice that you are attracted towards things like that, Facebook groups like that, teachers and writers that are like that, just be careful, because sometimes we are looking to fill that sense of direction we used to have with something else. So the church is no longer the institution that's handing us our beliefs and how we should behave. And so we're looking for something else instead. And I would really, really recommend against that. This is your time to build your thing. Like I said, if you want to go into an organized structure, no problem. If you want to join a coven where there are sort of set phases of initiation and group rituals, no problem. Definitely not saying that's a bad thing. But if you notice that you are like seeking warmth under the wing of this charismatic, all-knowing person who has a very specific agenda and a set of rules, and you notice that you would probably feel shamed or rejected if you did not go with those rules, have a think about what that reminds you of and whether or not you are trying to go back into a potentially religiously abusive situation. The last thing that I really want to strongly get across to you, darlings, is that you do not have to be drawn into religious debates, debates about the Bible, any of that stuff. If that is not something that you want to be drawn into, do not be drawn into it. Change the subject. Tell the person that's trying to debate you that you do not want to debate that subject. You know, whatever you've got to do. And certainly when it comes to coming out of the broom closet, if you're a witch, or the woo-woo wardrobe, if you are just alternatively spiritual, you don't have to do that in situations where it might land you in hot water, where it might be incredibly uncomfortable for you. Any situation where you would talk about your spiritual beliefs and it would then cost you a great deal of emotional labor to cope with the fallout from that, honestly, you do have the option not to talk about those spiritual beliefs. It's not a cop-out. It's not you like hiding from your duty to tell everybody that you're a witch or that you're, you know, spiritual. Look, at the end of the day, you have got the right to reserve your fucking energy. You have the right to do that, darling. So please do not RSVP to every debate that you get invited to. And please do not feel that you have to come out of the broom closet at every opportunity and tell even the most hostile of people in the most unwelcoming of environments that you happen to have this other spiritual paradigm. You know, you are welcome to just change the subject. And I would like to finish this video by reading a little excerpt from my book, Rebel Witch, Carve the Craft That's Yours Alone. I always have to look at the cover because it's so beautiful. So there is a section in part 1 called Coming Out of the Broom Closet. And I would like to just read you a little bit from this that is very much connected to the whole issue and question of whether or not you would come out of the broom closet or woo-woo wardrobe if you're not a witch. I get that not everybody watching it is necessarily going to identify as a witch. So I want to read this. Hopefully it will help you. For some, stepping out of the broom closet could be highly disruptive and even unsafe. The stakes may be too high for witches from deeply religious households or conservative communities. So in order to protect themselves, they may have to keep their practice clandestine. They might emerge from the closet to only a handful of people, asking them to keep the information private so that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Let's face it, being able to open up to everyone in your life without any fear of reprisal is a massive stroke of good luck, and not every witch finds themselves blessed in that way. Having to keep a lid on your practice doesn't make you less efficient or legitimate. Having to keep a lid on your practice doesn't make you a less efficient or legitimate witch. In fact, incubating your practice and its processes in secrecy can be beneficial. Sometimes telling too many people what you're doing risks encouraging their interference, or you might end up thinking overtime about how others perceive your path, rather than focusing on what you need from it. Don't convince yourself that you should be out and proud about your witchiness. If you're the only one who knows about your path, then it's often easier to experiment and explore, knowing that you don't need to explain or justify anything. For some witches, stepping out of the broom closet would certainly incur a gigantic amount of judgment or a shit ton of questions, so take all this into account before you decide how open you want to be. You might want to ask yourself the following questions. Who do I want to tell and why? How do I imagine or hope that leaving the broom closet will turn out? What would the worst outcome be and how would I react? What are the potential positive long-term effects of coming out as a witch? What are the potential negative long-term effects of coming out as a witch? Why is it important to recognise that I'm not obligated to leave the broom closet? How can I ensure that I still value my practice even if I don't leave the broom closet? Okay, so hopefully those questions and that little bit of encouragement will remind you that you are not obligated to be this very, very vocal pioneer for your spiritual path. if it's going to be more trouble than it's worth, if it's going to incur debates that you don't want to get involved in, please protect yourself first and foremost. Preserve your energy, put it into the spiritual exploration and the spiritual study that you would like to engage with, rather than feeling, okay, you know what, I have to RSVP to all of this crap. You don't have to. And that's where I want to leave it for today. Darlings, I very much hope that this has been a useful resource. Like I said, I have been wanting to circle back around to this topic for a while now, and I've finally done it, so I very much hope that it helps you. If you would like to work with me, I do offer a number of things that might be useful for you. I've got a solitary witch reading where we use the cards to guide you through what might be really great for you in your witchcraft, what your strengths are, what is coming up for you on the horizon with witchcraft, and all that good stuff. So if you're witchy in nature and you would like some guidance of that type, let me know, hit me up, go to my store. I've also got witchy brainstorming sessions. If you're right at the beginning of your practice, you're still feeling like you're getting tripped up by not knowing what you want to do, what you don't want to do, let's chat about it together. I do spiritual counselling sessions as well. I will leave the links to my store and to those particular things down below. And keep going. I commend your work. I know that this is really difficult at times, and honestly, like, everything that you're doing is just so beautiful, so hope-giving. You deserve to have a rejuvenated, honest and sovereign connection to divinity and spirituality. So keep doing you, darlings, and until next time, much love and blessed be.